Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, Storytime Samantha, and today I'm going to be doing my review of Ghost of Harvard by Francesca Ciaratella. So this book takes place obviously at Harvard, and it centers around Katie, who is an incoming freshman at Harvard. But what makes her different than any other incoming freshman is that her older brother, Eric, ended up committing suicide during his junior year at Harvard. So this book, she journeys to Harvard to kind of find out what happened in the last year of her brother's life. This boy who went from being a genius with so much potential in his life to being diagnosed with schizophrenia and ending up taking his own life. So she goes to Harvard in hopes of piecing together what his life was like during that time, since they were so distant. And during the course of her journey, she herself ends up hearing voices, and she is not sure if she herself is starting to suffer from schizophrenia like her brother did, or if she's actually encountering ghosts. So that is basically the plotline and summary of this book. I do want to talk a little bit about Francesca's writing. I do have my laptop to kind of keep me organized. So Francesca herself graduated from Harvard, and the descriptions of campus living and the campus itself was very detailed and very well written, that you actually felt like you were there yourself. But it wasn't written in a way that was boring or overwhelming. It was very authentic, and I really enjoyed that part of the writing. Another thing about that you could see with Francesca's writing was it was so well thought out. I think if it wasn't as well thought out as it was, we could be looking at a totally different book. It could have totally gone off the rails, but you could see how much time and attention she gave to layering each aspect of this book. And as a matter of fact, you see references in this book all the way from the Bible to Disney's Sword in the Stone. So that aspect was a little bit overwhelming because the plot line was so much that with the layering of all these different references, it got to be a bit much. So I want to talk about Katie, I'm sorry, I keep pronouncing it wrong. I know it's Katie, but the whole time I read, I was thinking it was Caddy. I know she goes back to Harvard. That's why she chose Harvard, was to find out about her brother's life. But through the course of the book, you see their relationship, and I found it to be a little bit unhealthy at times. Like, I thought she was a little bit obsessive, but I found it to be an unhealthy attachment, and it was driving me a little bit crazy throughout the reading. Okay, so a little bit about my thoughts. Overall, I did enjoy the book. I kept wanting to go back every time I put it down. But once I finished the book, I found it strangely took a lot out of me. You could see a little bit in my intro video how I was thinking about returning to reading a kid's book, because there were such heavy topics being dealt with. We were talking about mental illness, we were talking about paranormal, we were talking about so many heavy topics. There were so many references and topics that were discussed throughout the whole book, that not even sometimes heavy topics, like Eric, her brother, is a science genius, so there was a lot of science involved, which was fine. It's just that this book took a lot to read. It was not something that you're just going to sit down and read and be like, wow, this is really happy, or it doesn't take something emotional from you. Okay. Overall, though, I am happy I've read it. I would definitely read Francesca's other works anytime she puts out another novel. I'll be there. I can't wait to read it. But this is not a book that I'm going to be returning to anytime soon. I may possibly reread it way far in the future, but as of right now, I'm okay moving on to something a little bit lighthearted and fun. Okay, so now I'm going to give the warning that I'm going to be talking about spoilers. So if you don't want to hear any spoilers, go ahead, click out of the video. If you do want to hear spoilers, go ahead, stick around. The way I'm going to be doing this is a little bit differently, because when I was reading the book, I would give updates to my friends about what was happening. I have my review kind of in order as I was reading it, and my gut initial reaction. So some of it may be a little weird. Like, I kind of wish I had filmed reading through, doing more like a reading vlog than a review, but this is where we're at, so. So we start off with the prologue, and it seems like Katie is about to jump to her own suicide. We had not gotten to any ghosts yet, but when Katie moves into her college dorm, she thinks she sees her brother in the window. Now that I have done with the book, that really did not play any importance, and she actually does not ever hear her brother's voice or see him. Okay, so overall, she does start hearing some weird voices. We have a male's voice who starts interacting with her, and she does have some crazy moments that seem to mean to me that we were going in the direction of mental illness more than paranormal activity. But I was really holding out. This was very early on in the book, to see what was going to be coming. Okay, and then there's an episode of blasting music. She is showering alone in the dorm, in the showers, and all of a sudden she hears music that is so loud. And my original reaction was, okay, now we could be possibly getting to paranormal activity. And she's like, where is that music coming from? She thinks someone's in there with the showers with her. Nobody's there. She goes out into the hallway and hunts down this kid, and he's like, I don't hear any music. So that's why I thought we were going paranormal. But random songs get stuck in my head all the time. So that in itself is not really that weird to me. The fact that the music was from a different era was what was kind of like, all right, this is a little weird. And you do see throughout the book that each of the three voices or ghosts, whatever you want to call them, have their own distinct language. You can really tell that they're from different eras. So we have, I'm going to talk about Bilha. I might be pronouncing that wrong. I'm sorry. She was a black slave in the 1700s who was raped by her white master, who happened to be the president of Harvard University at the time, which resulted in her having a son. So she comes to Katie. Oh, I'm gonna keep doing that, I'm sorry. Katie asking for help to save her son. She ends up having this backstory of one day this rich white man comes into town and stops at Harvard looking for someone to help come save his son. Well, she is very well versed in herbology and knows about healing, natural healing. So she is brought with this rich white man back to the house, but by the time she gets there, that son has already passed. So a little bit more on her story as we go on. Katie, she has some weird scar on her neck that we don't know what's going on with it. There's a mystery surrounding this scar, which will come at the end what that is. So we get another voice who is supplying her with information throughout the book. This one pertains more to her schoolwork, and more to come on that. So what I did really appreciate in this book was that Katie herself gets freaked out and looks into schizophrenia, what it exactly entails, diagnosis, how it relates to genetics. So there was no Googling needed for any of this, which was really, really great. And her look into the diagnosis of schizophrenia really made me think we were moving back into the realm of mental illness. But then it kind of swung back to paranormal activity when Katie finds proof that Bilha was an actual person that lived. She was confirmed this when she was walking through Harvard campus, and there was a statue of the slaves that lived at Harvard. Okay, so throughout the course of this book, we find out that Eric, who was a genius, was working on some sort of experiment, project, grant. I don't know what exactly it was, but he was working on this science project, that's what I'm going with, about alternate dimensions, alternate realities out there. And when I first saw that plot point, I was like, I don't really know how this plays into it, but some way, somehow it does. And my thought was, because we have this weird Is this mental illness? Is this paranormal activity? Now we have this science project about alternate dimensions. If this is written out well, this could be a really amazing book. And I felt like as I was reading, the book got better and better. And then this was a really short scene in the book, but we meet Eric's roommate, Matt. It was a really short, I think it was like one chapter that was only a few pages. So Katie goes to meet Matt, and she goes to see him because he did not turn up at the funeral, even though that they invited him because he was Eric's roommate all 3 years of his college experience. Well, this character did a 180 from when she knew him. And she, of course, wants to talk about her brother and what it was like living with him and how he changed from freshman to junior year. So they sit down and talk. And now we're introduced to Professor Prokop. Okay, so this character, she was Eric's advisor on his science project. And she said that he became so delusional and it was such a problem that he had to be fired from working with her. But now we're hearing from Matt about Eric's side was that he quit working with this professor, that something was going really wrong and that they could be in deep, deep trouble with the FBI. My first thought was this was some sort of delusion. More to come. And so with 3 voices, there are 3 distinct voices throughout the whole story. They give her advice and insight into her brother. They speculated that the professor and Eric were in a sexual relationship. I don't know, that was my thought. I didn't really see it being sexual, but it could have been. All around the relationship, the whole thing was really kind of sketchy. Okay, so then we get the song again, and it returns with my favorite character voice, Whit. I really loved Whit. You know when you're like, I really wish this one character was real from a book? I kind of wish Whit was real, even though he may be one of her delusions. So Whit was a Harvard student in the 1930s with dreams of following his father into being a soldier. He talks about his father dying in the Great War, which is World War I. And so I'm going to get more into Whit in a little bit, but I really loved him. Favorite character, hands down. Okay, and then there was like one hot moment where she was looking at someone and their facial features kind of distorted, which made me think we were back at Paranormal Activity, but it was like a hot second. But either way, my thoughts at this point were this whole thing, whether it's voices or ghosts, it's taking over her life. Okay, so now we're gonna get back into a little bit about that alternate dimension, alternate reality. So all 3 ghost voices, they act like they're alive and are experiencing life at their present time. And that Katie is just somehow intermingled, just a part of their everyday reality. It's kind of hard to explain, but the 3 of them are very distinct and very different, and she hears their voices in areas where they would have been during their actual lifetime. Like Whit. Whit was a rower and was into astronomy. So when she enters the astronomy building, we hear Whit's voice. When she ends up in a scene going into a row house, she hears Whit's voice. Robert, who was the voice who gives her insight into schoolwork, we always hear him in like the classroom or when she's walking across campus. Bilha, who lived in the 1700s, who obviously would not have been a student, we kind of hear her voice come and go on the grounds of the campus, not really in any of the buildings so much. Okay, so they're experiencing their realities as it's like happening. So Katie eventually finds out what happens to all 3 of these people, and they don't know anything about their futures. And then what made me think we were kind of, it really didn't confirm or deny either theory, mental illness for paranormal was she takes a weekend trip home and she hears nothing. The voices completely stop. Then there's a random scene where she's making dinner, and she's actually not making dinner, she's getting dinner from the dining hall. That's the word I'm looking for. She's getting dinner from the dining hall. She is preparing for her veggie burger, and she ends up putting chocolate syrup and peanut butter on her veggie burger. And when she goes to eat it, we get a voice that gets very, very offended that she's eating it. And this is what made me think we were in paranormal, was that first off, this ghost made his own sandwich and had a name for it. And he started telling the story, this was Robert, about this one time where he was frozen and her body got really cold, and then he got embarrassed and she felt herself blush. So I kind of want to talk a little bit more about Robert. So he was a student in the 1920s. And
I said I want to talk more about him, but my note says more to come on him. So we'll get back to Robert.
None of the voices or what they're doing were very scary, but I was thinking it might turn scary because we opened up with her apparent jump to suicide. And then we meet Lee. Lee is an actual person. She is not a voice or ghost. She was somebody who knew Eric. She was in the same year as Eric, and she creates this fake Facebook page for Eric, which for a paranoid schizophrenic, that is just, there are so many things wrong with that. And there's a reason why she made it. It wasn't just out of her own volition, but still, I can't with that. So Katie finds out about this fake profile that was made for Eric, and she knows it's Lee. Like, she hears about this girl and she's like, it was her. And she storms into her dorm room. She pretends to be working on a project with her, so the roommate lets her in. And while Lee is not there, she searches her dorm room and finds pictures of Professor Prokop. Again, I could be pronouncing that name wrong. She is Eric's advisor, or was Eric's advisor.
So
she sneaks into this room, and again, she finds pictures of this professor. So Lee was stalking this professor, which, you know, Eric was spending a lot of time with her. Again, a paranoid schizophrenic someone made him a fake Facebook account and somebody was stalking him. Really not him, someone he was always spending time with. So Katie spaces out so much throughout this whole book, and this is what kind of made me think, oh, we're moving back to mental illness. She walks in front of a moving car, but she says she feels two strong hands pull her out of the way. Well, there happened to be a high school tour of the campus at that particular day and time, and there's a video of her being saved, and it shows this scrawny high schooler boy just hook his arm around her and pull her back this way. So if the video shows a scrawny teenage boy just kind of hooking his arm around her, that does not match the description of two strong hands pulling on each arm to pull her out of the way. So I was like, oh, we're back to paranormal.
And then Whit comes back. I love Whit.
And he starts talking about how he pulled her out of the way, and good thing he was there. She cannot see or feel any type of presence, so we don't know if it's supernatural. And at this point, she really is honing in on, my brother was right, there's some sort of alternate dimension that's layered with ours, and that's why I can hear them but can't see them, and that's why they're experiencing me as if I'm in their lives. Alright, so throughout this entire book, Katie holds onto this notebook that her brother has, and this notebook, it originally starts out all nice and neat and pristine with his notes, very thorough, thought out, makes a lot of logical sense. As his mental illness started to take over, his well thought out, detailed notes started turning into scribbles and gibberish, and we didn't really know what it was. So Robert was talking to her and was like, you know what, you are his sister, like you should be the one to be able to decode it. Like he would have left a trail for you to figure it out, of all people. So she has this epiphany, like, you know what, when we were younger, he used to make codes for me all the time. There's some way I can crack this notebook. And she does. But it led to more gibberish. It was mostly numbers, but we didn't know what it was. So, here's another character I have not talked about. Nikos was a friend of Eric's, and he somehow played a bigger part in the story, but I wasn't really sure how. I just knew he somehow, someway did. Now Bilha's back, and she wanted Katie's help to save her son. And just a refresher, this is the son that was born to a black slave and her white master. So she went off to try to save this rich white family's son, but he was already dead upon arrival. So Bilha's brilliant plan is that, you know what, my son can pass as a white boy. And she wants Katie's help to write a letter to free her son. So the way this ended up working out was Bilha couldn't write, Katie couldn't see her. She was like, I don't know how to do this. So she's like, why don't I write down whatever message you want in my brother's notebook and you can trace it. So she starts writing out the message in Eric's notebook.
I want to see if I can find what it was, because for Katie, it made sense. Like, she was writing out this message and Bilha could just trace it over.
But it's too small and Bilha can't trace it. So she writes it again, but bigger. Still doesn't work. Again, but bigger. And her message was, God have mercy on this orphan. Guide him to a Christian home. So she writes that message over and over in the back of her brother's notebook. All right, so I want to move on to this scene about where Katie and Nikos were in the astronomy tower at night after it was closed. Whit happens to be in the astronomy tower with them, and when Nikos goes to kiss Katie, she gets scared because she's not sure if she is kissing Nikos or Whit. So Whit happens to know all about astronomy, and he suggests that the gibberish that Katie decoded might actually be coordinates. So now we have this mystery on top of everything else about where these coordinates lead to and how they're somehow connected to Professor Prokop. So then we'll be coming back to that. We get another episode where Katie spaces out and Robert ends up writing her homework assignment, and she gets called out for plagiarism. I mean, it does sound crazy, like she's freaked out by it and everything, but her main focus is not about that she's called out for plagiarism or that she spaced out and someone else wrote her homework. She's more concerned about what these coordinates lead to and why are they in her brother's notebook. Also, my thought was that this somehow connects to this weird, sketchy science project and this professor. And with this tracking down coordinates, Katie starts going off the rails, and she becomes afraid what's going to happen to the ghost who think that they are alive. I mean, it sounds kind of obvious what's going to happen to them if they're ghosts. But either way, the ghost and her realities are starting to blur together. She's even starting to have feelings and fall in love with Whit. I
can see why. Whit is a really well written out character. I really love him.
But he decides that he wants to dedicate his future to being with Katie. That he's going to devote his life to her. And she's like, he can't do that. That's going to change the course of his life. Meanwhile, if he is a ghost, his life is already played out. So she breaks his heart and is like, I don't love you. We're not going to be together. Bye.
Wow.
I wish I had a real reaction video for this scene because I don't even know. I mean, I'm having a breakdown just thinking about it. It was wow. Okay, so she's having so her roommates find this notebook of her brother's which now has her own crazy writing in it. And her roommates are convinced that she is schizophrenic and that she has some mental illness because A, of what her brother went through, and B, her own writing in this notebook. And the fact that she went from this attentive, high-functioning, very high-achieving student to a student who blew off a midterm. That's right, this book takes the place from moving day of of Harvard to midterms. What? So she gets so mad. But honestly, I had so much anxiety. This girl blew up on midterm. Ooh. So she goes to Nikos' room, whose room just happened to be Whit's dorm room when he was alive. And she goes to this dorm room, and so her and Nikos have sex, but she's experiencing it and she sees Whit.
Oh my goodness, this girl. She is, I don't even know.
She's having sex with a real person, but her experience is one with a ghost. Like,
I can't even explain all the things. Yeah, that's how I feel. I don't really know.
like what a scene. What a scene. Also, that scene was like not really dirty. It was not in detail. It was not nitty gritty. It was just, she saw Whit. An end scene. So back to the fact that she blew off a midterm. I have so much anxiety for this girl. Like, I've been through college. I know how stressful it was. And I can't even imagine it being at Harvard. And she's also dealing with the fact that she was called out for plagiarizing. She needs to get it together. That is my thoughts. We get confirmation about Bilhah's death, which was the same year that Bilhah freed her son. So Katie feels like if she didn't write this letter, this event wouldn't have happened. That she somehow could have saved Bilhah. Never mind the fact that we're talking about a woman from the 1700s. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with this girl. And I could see how now we're gearing up to what seems like her suicide. Also, side note, she's becoming more and more paranoid throughout the whole book. Now, back to Robert. This girl feels like her connection with all these voices, ghosts, or that they are all doomed, or that it's punishment for not saving her brother. But Robert, turns out, the author, Francesca, has Robert, he's an actual person, Robert Oppenheimer, if I'm pronouncing that right. And you can Google him. He is a real person. He created the atomic bomb. So you don't know that until very late in the story, that he eventually becomes the creator of the atomic bomb. So yeah, I don't know. There was just so much happening. I kind of wanted to look up if the ghosts were like also real people. Also, I don't think Whit was a real character. I think Bilhah was a real slave at Harvard, but Whit, I think, was a fictional character, but his life events on how he died were real. Okay. So once Katie learns about Bilhah's death, she stops hearing her voice. And her theory is because the voices ghost timeline are playing out in real time, that because Bilhah died, she will no longer hear her voice. And honestly, that was a really good theory. I like that. Oh, and why she thought Whit was going to be doomed. We heard about the slave, Robert, who would become the inventor of the atomic bomb, and Whit, who during his time was out to be a soldier during World War II. So, let's see. Oh, and Whit and Robert's voices stop when they would have left school. Not because they died. Whit ends up taking a career opportunity, and Robert also does. And now we finally circle back to the mysterious scar that is on Katie's neck. Katie's brother Eric gave her that scar. It was night. He, I guess, was having a delusion, and he decided that he had to hack off her hair. And honestly, I never really liked Katie's parents throughout the entire story, but I didn't think it was important until this very moment. So her brother locks them in her bedroom at night, tries to hack off her hair, and instead ends up cutting her neck, cutting her hand, and they call the cops, I guess, at some point. This was not in the scene, but we skip to the car ride to the hospital. Eric, the brother, is in the ambulance with the mother, and the father is driving Katie separately to the emergency room.
Okay. Even though she was attacked and has a cut on her neck and hand, she's not in the ambulance. So they get to the hospital, the father drops her off in front of the emergency room and leaves her. And then her father eventually comes and sees her just in time for her to be, like, dismissed. Not dismissed. For her to be released from the hospital. But her mother never comes and checks on her. Like, her mom never comes to check on her. Like, at all. I feel like, I mean, I'm not a parent, but I feel like it may be hard to navigate multiple children. There's 2 in this case, but your daughter was just attacked. Like, I feel like that is really the time, like, you need to pay attention to that other child. I know Eric takes up all your time because he has a mental illness, but my goodness, please check on your daughter. It bothers me so much that she did not check on her daughter. Like, I feel like that really is the time you need to check on her. And at this point, when I was texting my friends, I was like, all right, I'm going to move on from them. But I had to circle back to them because there's more. Like, the mom, like, okay, so the mom sees Katie and doesn't even ask her how she's feeling. This girl got stitches in her neck and hand because she got cut with a knife and her hair is missing. And she doesn't ask her daughter if she's okay. Like, it really bothered me a lot. And then, so the mother comes out, doesn't say anything, and she's like, your brother's going to be fine. Your brother's going to be fine? It really, really bothers me. I lost my place because I'm just so upset and annoyed and aggravated.
So, and then the daughter, Katie, was upset because she was like, my hair's cut off, I have this pain in my neck and my hand, and her mom got mad because she was upset. I mean...
What?
I cannot. So then the doctors at the hospital are like, should we put him on a 72-hour hold because is he a danger to himself or others? The mom's like, no, he is absolutely fine. We'll take him home right now. Even though he attacked his sister with a knife. So we're gonna move on from that because it really aggravated me a whole lot that this mother was just like, nope, he's fine, even though he attacked his sister with a knife. It really, really bothered me. And a little bit more on that scene was that the father was like, maybe we should ask Katie because she was the victim of this attack. And she is upset that her parents weren't there for her when she was being treated at the hospital, that her mother did not care and got mad that she was upset, and that her only focus is Eric. And she feels like she's upset, and even though she feels not afraid of her life, she wants her brother put on that 72-hour watch, which she says, looking back, it completely changed him and who he was, and she feels guilty and that this was the trigger of events that led to his suicide. Okay, and then we hop over to Parents Weekend. We're just now at Parents Weekend, and her mom comes. Her mom refused to talk to her when she decided to go to Harvard. She refused to help her move into her dorm room, so her dad and her handicapped aunt moved her into her dorm room. But her mom gets over it and comes for Parents Weekend. And this woman, who is a blonde, dyes her hair red to match her son's hair color. Okay, I really do not like these parents. But now that we're past the whole sex with a ghost and aggravating parents, we're gonna go back to the coordinates. So they end up being drop sites. And Katie tracks down all these sites, and the last one happens to have a flash drive and a letter written by Eric. And the letter explains that Professor Prokop, which I knew was somehow involved in this, was working on some sort of experiment for the US government that was successful, and this Professor Prokop, made him go to these drop sites because she was selling the results and intelligence to Russia. And this is why the notebook had the coordinates, because they were he fake dropped information. Which all the notebooks were timed and dated with the coordinates, So this way, looking back, you can know exactly what was what. And the one drop was in full view of security cameras. So, and going back to when, Katie was talking to Matt about when he quit, was fired from this, working with his advisor, Professor Prokop. Matt's version was Eric said he quit. They were somehow going to be in trouble with the FBI, and that this professor came banging down their door, screaming, upset, begging him to come back. Well, you know what? No wonder why, because she was using him to sell US secrets.
Which was a turn I did not see coming.
I briefly mentioned Lee, but she was the one who made the fake Facebook account. Well, she was also stalking Professor Prokop, as I said, and she has photos from the night Eric died. And I was like, I can't wait to see how this plays out.
Like, what? This is gonna be crazy.
But so Katie ends up getting the pictures from Lee, and she looks at them on her computer, and she's thinking that she is going to see Professor Prokop push Eric out the window, and that he really didn't commit suicide, he was murdered. But we look at the photos, and it's not Professor Prokop, it is the mother. Her mother was there when the brother died, and that is also another really unforeseen turn.
What?
Yeah, so I really don't like the mother, but to see your son jump to his death can be, I don't know, we're moving on from this. So now it finally looks like we are at what the prologue was showing us of her jumping to her death. I mean, she's losing her brother, she's being haunted by ghosts, or voices in her head, we're not sure. She's unable to prove that Professor Prokop was selling US intelligence because the only evidence and proof she has is from her schizophrenic brother that would go against the word of a very well-known, very well-respected professor. Nikos, who was Eric's friend who she had sex with, turned out the whole time he was lying. He actually was enemies with Eric and hated Eric. So that was that. And then we find out that the mother was there when the brother committed suicide. And also, randomly, her parents split up during all this time she's away at school. So I see why we led up to the suicide. But then she decides, you know what? I want to live. I'm not going to jump. And she turns around and Professor Prokop is ready to push her off the building.
This story just took another turn that I was not ready for.
And then, don't worry, she ends up fine. She is not pushed off a building. Actually, she is pushed off a building, but she holds on. And cops arrive because her mother was waiting for her to eat dinner out. And when Katie failed to show up, she went to her dorm room, and the dorm mate said she was looking at pictures on a computer. It was really, really upset. And she finds Katie, and yeah, I mean, there was so much happening in this book. I mean, everything does wrap up. Katie does come clean to her parents about the voices, ghosts that she was talking to, hearing. Professor Prokop does get arrested and go to jail. The voices do stop. I have to say, this girl goes through one heck of a semester. I mean, we're only at midterms and parents' weekend. Like, that's it. That is the whole novel. It only takes place from moving day to midterms. What a semester. And honestly, this book has done something to me. I'm not sure what it did to me, but I don't know. There was voices, ghosts, suicide. There was science involved. There was Russians and selling US intellect going on. I mean,
Wow.
okay. So I do have one more point to make, because I think this book could either go either route. It could go down, she had a mental illness, or it really could go down the paranormal route. The book, like I said, does wrap up. She gets help, she gets into therapy, and the therapist does give her a diagnosis for what could have been happening while she was hearing the voices. And the book does wrap up 5 years later when she does officially graduate from Harvard after her one heck of a half semester. She takes the rest of that year off and restarts the following year, which, honestly, smart move, girl. Smart move. So because the ghost had their own stories and they were living their day-to-day life and they were supplying her with information and insight that she herself could have not known, like the coordinates, Robert supplied her with information for school about books she never read. It was a lot of academic information that he gave. Plus, she saw wit. I mean, she felt herself going cold and blushing at that one story that Robert was telling. She had full-blown conversations with them. And they seemed to only be in contact with her in places that they normally would have been themselves. And I discussed that a little bit earlier. Also, when she went home and she was away from Harvard campus, she did not hear voices. But on the other hand, for the delusion side, I mean, this girl lost her brother to suicide and she does not face her grief. She does not get help before going to Harvard, which losing someone you love is a very emotional thing, and not to face that definitely can be very stressful and hard. And to combine that with going to the place that he took his life as a freshman in college, I mean, all those things are very, very stressful. I mean, in Tan, like, also she was having a really tumultuous relationship with her parents while her brother was alive, because they were so focused on helping Eric that she was not getting attention. And then she decides she's going to Harvard, and her mom wants nothing to do with her because she's going to Harvard. And when she leaves Harvard, the voices stop. I mean, at the end, when her parents take her home to take a year off, the voices stop. So yeah, we could really be looking at either or. But after that half the semester, she never hears voices or see ghosts ever again. And it was one heck of a journey reading through this book. Again, this is what the book looks like. And so that is the conclusion of this video. If you have any comments or questions, post them down below, and I will see you soon for another video. Bye!